Good afternoon. This is Jeff J. Brown in beautiful Shenzhen, China, for another podcast based on an article which will be placed, whose link will be placed with the SoundCloud recording. Its title is Gag a Maggot: People's Misplaced Concerns for Refugees and Muslim Travelers. Here we go. It's really, really hard not to get frustrated and even angry at the spectacle of millions of people demonstrating about refugees fleeing to seemingly safer, more stable pastures, and now marching against President Trump's 6-month entry ban from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Don't get me wrong. Many of them are sincere and mean the best for social justice and equality. But scratch below the surface, and it is all very emblematic of what a huge predicament humanity is in. First, many happenings and events that transpire in the 24-hour news cycle are not spontaneous and organic, including all these ongoing pro-refugee and anti-travel ban protests. The fact is, like false flags, they are likely commanded, controlled, and financed by the governments of the citizens concerned, either directly or via proxies, NGOs, foundations, etc. As much as we all deny it, in our heart of hearts, we know that our leaders and our quote, democratic, end of quote, systems are corrupted and controlled by deep state manipulators, puppeteers, and eminence grise, the ones who really run the show. They being Wall Street transnationals, oil bankers, generals, spies, and the always obedient, purchased and sold out mainstream media pushing their slick propaganda in the oxymoronic, quote, free press, end of quote. We refuse to talk about it, deal with it, react to it, much less try to change it, or even more daunting, overthrow it. Why? Because the bitter truth about our myths and ideas would come shattering down, exposing everything we've been brought up to stand for as hollow lies and cynical kabuki theater. It's much, much easier to be complacent and apathetic, living in the cozy life of super consumer sheeple. Why get out of that, quote, civilized, end of quote, cocoon where it's comfortably numb to, quote, a great truth-telling song by Pink Floyd, hyperlink provided. Inside, life is full of mostly unnecessary material fluff and stuff, with our brains bathed in vapid TV shows and unending eye-candy movie sequels. Real organic contentment and intellectual fulfillment can take a hike. Hasta la vista, baby. It's a brave new world. All those millions of refugees pouring in from the exploited global south, namely Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, are no accident. Our deep state owners are greedily using these victims of Western wars, murderous sanctions, and trade policies to drive down salaries and benefits among the native populations and to further pummel trade unions into Potemkin paper tigers. Our owners also exploit racism and the timeless imperial strategy of divide and conquer to polarize society towards the extremes of anarchy and ultranationalism in order to drown out reasoned voices, justify police state fascism, and the renunciation of daily freedoms and dignities. This whole scenario is brilliantly and pithily spelled out by Mr. Jimmy Moglia, who shows that the manufactured refugee, quote, crisis, end of quote, is nothing more than a carefully scripted war on the poor, by the poor, for the enrichment of our Western owners. Hyperlink provided. Our masters play for keeps. They want it all. And with capitalism as king, that means all of Mother Earth and her inhabitants. Nothing less is acceptable, and nothing much has changed during 8,000 years of sedentary humankind. I'll avoid using sedentary civilization as a gesture of literary honesty. Protesting Trump's 6-month ban on travelers from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen is akin to being outraged, simply outraged, that a serial, suppurating, AIDS-cankered rapist does not leave roses for his many victims. Why are all these protesters not screaming and marching against the West's genocide, annihilation, and attempted dismemberment, in parentheses, successful in Sudan, end of quote, of these 7 countries, their peoples, and their ways of life? We can go back to at least 1980, when the U.S. used and goaded Iraqi President Saddam Hussein into invading Iran as proxy punishment for the Iranians having the temerity to overthrow the West's harlot Shah, Reza Pahlavi, and then humiliating empire by occupying the American embassy in Tehran, full of hostages for all the world to see. The United States and Western Europe then gleefully sold chemical weapons to Iraq, which are, of course, supposedly banned by, quote, civilized, end of quote, countries. Uncle Sam then happily provided the Iraqi army with real-time satellite photos so it could pinpoint targets in Iran, gruesomely massacring hundreds of thousands of people. Iran, like most other countries that maintain their independence and sovereignty from Western control, in parentheses, China, Cuba, Eritrea, North Korea, Russia, et al. The list is long, and there is a hyperlink provided. Iran has been keeping its head high and its dignity intact in spite of inhumane economic, financial, and informational sanctions which have cost its people daily suffering, shorter lifespans, and death. These Western sanctions have been cruelly enforced since the Iranians' revolution of liberation from Western tyranny in 1979. Why are all these Muslim people and, quote, civilized, end of quote, Westerners around the globe not loudly protesting the genocide, annihilation, and destruction of the Palestinian people at the hands of racist apartheid Israel? Why are they not organizing a global BDS, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, to fight Israel's genocidal crimes against humanity? Hyperlink provided. Why are they not pouring into the streets by the millions, demanding Nuremberg trials against every American president since Eisenhower, as well as prosecuting their enabling Western prime ministers and presidents, such as Tony Blair and Nicolas Sarkozy, not to mention Benjamin Netanyahu? Hyperlink provided. Why are they not storming the embassies of the West in Israel, showing outrage at the imperial extermination of millions of their brothers and sisters? How about blockading all their national versions of the White House and Congress? What about the living, those who bravely survive Western and Israeli wars and colonialism? Shouldn't they rather be taking concrete action for these tens of millions of Western and Israeli victims who are existing in homelessness, hunger, sickness, and misery? In parentheses, Iran's independence helps mitigate many of these crises. For the uncounted, ignored in the West, millions of dead Iranians, Iraqis, Libyans, Somalians, Sudanese, Syrians, Yemenis, and Palestinians, along with their wounded, handicapped, and destitute brethren. Do they really give a rat's ass about green cards, H-1 visas, or counting their frequent flyer miles? With all due respect, these protesters are brainwashed, misguided pawns. They are enough to gag a maggot. This is Jeff J. Brown in Shenzhen, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out. Have a great day, and we are celebrating Lantern Festival tonight in China. Good night.